But I want to take the moment here to introduce our speaker, Steve Roark. He has spent 30 years in the service of the Tennessee Division of Forestry, where he's currently the area forester. And through this position, he provides assistance with forest management on private forest land, public information and education programs, wildfire control, and prescribed fire use on private lands. Steve is involved with establishing and implementing the Tennessee Certified Burner Program. And before his career with the Tennessee Division of Forestry, Steve served as a forester for the Kentucky Division of Forestry for 5 years. He graduated in 1976 with a degree in forestry from the University of Kentucky, and he's presently living on a family farm in the hills of East Tennessee. And Steve is here today to talk to us about the Gatlinburg fire, kind of the story of how it happened, what was happening, and the lessons that we can take away from this event. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Steve.
All right, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, whichever the case may be. So I appreciate y'all coming and attending. So I'll get right to it. So this is just a talk, more or less, about the fires that occurred in Gatlinburg on November 28th of last year. And the main topics I'll be touching on, hopefully briefly, was kind of what led up to the situation, our extreme drought conditions we were having prior to the fire, the weather that was occurring more or less around November 28th, which is primarily a large wind event, and then the wildland urban interface that was around the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge area, which was quite dense, and all these kind of lined up, if you will, to be a perfect storm of what happened. And so I'll talk about those, and then I'll talk about my agency's Tennessee Division of Forestry's efforts and tactics, excuse me, to protect the structures. And then also I'll line it up with post-community activities concerning fire prevention primarily. So we'll go with that. All right, so a little bit of background on Tennessee wildfire. Our official season is October 15th to May 15th. There's been some late top here. I'm not sure what's going on.
Hey, Steve. So I think we're having a little bit of sound issues. Sorry to interrupt you. Maybe try putting the phone a little bit closer, and we'll see if you sound a little bit better.
Okay, how's that? Is that better?
That is better. Thank you.
All right. So our official season is October 15th to May 15th, basically late fall, winter, and spring. And most of our fires occur in usually either November, or February, April. We usually have a break in between, like December or January, when we usually have cold temperatures and some snow, stuff like that. So generally, we kind of have a split season, but officially it's just one long season through the winter. We're primarily deciduous forests, so our leaf litter, ground fires are the norm for us. We do have some grasslands, but they're kind of small and mostly like hayland pasture type situations. So most of our fires are hardwood litter fires. Our annual leaf drop usually occurs around early November, and historically our worst fire seasons do occur in the fall. That's because when the leaves first hit the ground, they're kind of nice and fluffy, real aerated, and so as the winter progresses, we get snows and rains that kind of combat that down. So our fuels during our fall is usually a little more aggressive than they are in the spring, just because of that added fluff from being freshly on the ground. So we'll talk about our drought conditions that we had leading up to the fire. Rainfall history for Knoxville, that's where the National Weather Service keeps the records. The annual average is 47 inches. And because of the Smoky Mountain National Park has some elevation mountains, so you kind of have that orographic impact. So usually in the Smokies, they usually have a few more inches. I think one of the stations kind of averages more like 53 to 55 inches for that. So but in 2014, we actually were in a deficit of 5 inches, and 2015 was 2 inches below, and then 2016 was a very large deficit of over 10 inches below normal. So all that was accumulative that led to some of our issues, made our fuels, especially our dry and our wet fuels, live fuels, much drier than we're used to. Keacham Bomb Index, this is for in November, as you can see from the coloration there. Most of the state was in the 600 range, which is fairly dry, and then the southern middle end, where Chattanooga and stuff like that, they're even drier, and some of that actually extended up into the Knoxville, Gatlinburg area. here's another, maybe a little better showing what it is. So basically, this indicates that the Chattanooga area and the edge of Gatlinburg area was in exceptional drought, and the rest of the state was in extreme drought conditions. The energy release component, of course, that's the potential energy release along the flame front when the fire comes through. Normally for East Tennessee, it's usually 16 to 20, but for November, it was averaging around 35, and actually closer to November 28th is even much higher than that. Leaf litter, what ended up occurring was most of the leaf litter was totally consumed. Invariably, in a normal season, we don't have all the leaf layer burning all the way to the ground, but in this case, a lot of times it was burning all the way. So it was literally a scorched earth scenario where everything was burnt. And our backing fires were surprisingly fast. They surprised me more than once in how quickly they would back down the hill. So the behavior was something we definitely weren't used to for the East Tennessee. Our heavy fuels were dry enough that they were actually burned to ash. Normally, when a fire comes through, they'll char them and burn them some. There'll be an issue, along our containment lines, but generally they don't burn all the way up. So they were this time, and so that made for extended heat possibilities along the line. So the fire's just burning longer, and stumps are actually burning up. This picture here, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's actually 3 stump holes here in this one picture. Normally our stumps just don't burn under the ground like that, but they were this time. It's just another indication of how dry our fuels were. And we were having what I call duff layer creep. It's where the duff layer, that half-rotten layer underneath the leaf litter, was actually burning, sometimes with very little smoke or flame, and they would creep off. Perhaps it might take it 2 or 3 days, but eventually it would, creep across your line and give you grief, especially our hand lines. Dorsal lines, that wasn't an issue, but hand lines, we'd end up having to do what we call turfing here. We literally cut a trench through the duff layer to kind of break that fuel so it won't cross your line. So we're having to deal with that, or our hand lines. Snag issues they're always not good, but they're even worse here. They were, basically if the snag caught on fire, eventually it was going to come down because it was not going to go out on its own. And we also had an issue with the live trees, definitely safety issues. I don't know if that duff layer was disrupting the root system to the point where the live trees, especially the strong leaners, were falling down, but we had more live trees come down during our fires than normal. And we're having weird things like this. This is a culvert under a road. The road was the containment line, so the upper part of the picture is where the fire was. And normally you would think culverts would be like a cave. It'd be moist and dark in there, but it was dry enough. It was literally burning through the leaves. Leaves that were piled up inside the culvert, popped down the other side and started a fire on this side. That happened on at least 2 occasions that I know of. And also in Gatlinburg, a lot of these culverts are plastic, and in some cases there, the plastic culvert burnt and collapsed the road, which created access issues for fire engines and things like that. So again, not something we see every day here. And we even had weird poison ivy. It's our version of poison ivy basically grows up the sides of trees and things like that, but it was literally catching on fire and run up the tree 20, 25 feet up and throw sparks close to your line, and again, didn't make life easy by having these kinds of things happening. Moss normally grows in moist sites where we're at, but it was dry enough that our moss was actually burning, 5, 6 feet up on the boulders. So again, something we just weren't used to seeing. The drought also extended our leaf fall period. I didn't put this picture in here to show the retardant drop, but this picture, that's not actually on the Chimney Tops fire. That's another fire called East Miller Cove, and we did use retardant there. And we don't do that very often. It's very rare that we had to pull in retardant drops, but we did this for this particular fire for the East Miller Cove. But what I want to show in this picture is all the ranges of the canopy. In the very foreground, you'll see, where leaves are still actually green, and in this ridge here, just below the aircraft, it's doing its fall color thing. And then in the very background, you can see where the leaves are brown, but they're still hanging on the tree. And so normally our leaves are on the ground by, say, first week or so of November, but I think the drought extended that leaf drop, and it causes problems because we put our lines in for fires and back from them out, mop them up, walk away from them and come back and check them, later on, and they were covered up with leaves again, which could have potentially been caught up again by some heavy fuel still burning and cross our line. So we're having to do extra babysitting for a lot of our fires. And also that having the having the leaves up in the trees did create a couple of times when we actually did have a crown fire in a hardwood stand, which is highly unusual. I didn't see it myself, but there was a couple of crews witnessed that, and so again that created safety issues and certainly containment issues as well. Of course, the spotting potential was much higher when you have fuel. Fuel that dry, just need a little spark and start something. So spotting potential was much higher as well. So the bottom line is containment was considered more difficult. So fires actually were acting like they do out west. I know a lot of you guys are listening here from out west are saying, what's the big deal about everything you saw? That's normal for us. But like I say, the way the conditions were looking, our fires are actually acting more like western fires. And so folks that in our agency that hadn't been out west, it was a bit of a learning curve to where they had to realize that you have to try harder to contain these fires just because of the burning conditions. So it basically created more work to hold and secure lines, more resources, and more time. And we did eventually, along about the first, maybe the second week of November, started bringing in crews from our division from the western end of the state, and gradually started bringing in some western crews as well from as far away as Alaska. So we did start having to bring in some outside resources and more equipment. And this just, don't like to use a lot of graphs because they're kind of too busy, but this just shows, how 16 compared to normal. We actually had fewer fires for 2016, which is kind of surprising to me anyway. We're actually almost half below our numbers, but the telling tale with the conditions we had was the number of acres burned. It was the second highest in a 50-year record-keeping time frame, 85,000 acres, of which usually we only average around 3,200 acres. And then the average fire size is a telling thing too. It was the highest on record. It averaged 63 acres for 2016, and our average for the 50-year period is only 11.4. And so, while 63 acres may not sound like a lot, some of those fires, to make that average, are actually in the hundreds and if not thousands of acres. All right, so enough background, so we'll start talking about the Chimney Tops 2 fire. This is Chimney Tops. It's in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, a very popular place to hike to because it's kind of like got a sheer rock knob there on top, really good views, real popular place to go if you're hiking in the Smokies. And it actually had a fire in November, I think it's November 12th and 13th. They had a small fire that they contained under an acre. And so that one was just called the Chimney Fire. But then on November 23rd, I had another fire that actually got onto that steep terrain. Oh, let me back up here and just point out that it is extremely steep terrain. It's hopefully obvious to you. There's a lot of bluffs there, very steep slopes, and so very difficult terrain to work in. And so like when the Chimney 2, which again, November 23rd on that one, occurred, they decided, because of the extreme terrain and the safety issues it did, the Park Service chose to kind of back off to some containment areas that they could, safely and reasonably expect to hold. So they backed off to some hiking trails and some drains, some wet drains to hopefully hold the fire. Probably at this picture, I think we're looking at probably around 400 acres for that. So that was the game plan the day after the fire started. So then on Sunday, November 27th, the day before the fire started, this is what it looked like. Again, it wasn't burning a solid ring around it. It hadn't backed off the fire, the mountain that much, mostly burning fingers and places like that through those bluffs and stuff and such. And so so the weather forecast for East Tennessee for Sunday, I don't know how we can see this, but it really didn't sound that bad. For Sunday there was light and variable winds. Humidities were kind of up in the 30s, and the night forecast for that time was again still fairly calm, and humidity recovery was supposed to be up in the 70s. They did call for Monday for predicted winds to get up a little more gusty. It looks like because it was a cold front was expected to come in Monday, and so that was the prediction, was there was going to have some higher winds with gusts, according to this, into the 30 mile an hour range. This was Monday's forecast for our division, and when we all heard this Sunday forecast, I backed up one slide, we were kind of told at our briefing, we indicated briefing that everybody needed, we had about 20 odd fires going at that time, so everybody was told to kind of button those down as best they could, so that when this wind event came through, it wouldn't hopefully be a problem. And I believe the Park Service followed that thought as well, because they started bringing helicopters in on Sunday and dropping quite a bit of water on the Chimney Tops 2 fire to, again, try to button it down for when the cold front comes through. So again, Monday's forecast is starting to really show where they were expecting some pretty good winds, especially Monday. Again, they're still showing wind predicted to be in the mid-teen range and gusts up to 30 to 40 miles an hour. So at this point, again, Chimney Tops 2 is well into the Smoky Mountain Park, and the distance to Gatlinburg is roughly 5 miles. So what happened Sunday night did not, was not a normal thing. Usually when it gets dark, as it does probably most places, our humidity start recovering. They'll start turning up and get up probably in the 60-70% range. But that Sunday night before the fire, they continued to drop, according to one weather station that was local, a remote area weather station, continued to drop well into midnight. At midnight, it was like in the mid to upper 20s. And then it didn't actually start recovering and going up to around 3 o'clock on Monday morning. So it stayed very dry Sunday night and Monday morning. And then the winds got up and started getting gusty that night too. They came in a little ahead of the prediction as well. So Monday morning at daybreak, it was found out that the fire had jumped down into the lower red dot is picnic area was down in there. And then it was also found it had crossed Highway 441 and and the winds, of course, were blowing out of the south towards Gatlinburg and was starting to hit these ridges. There's about 3 or 4 major ridges between the Chimney Tops 2 fire and the Gatlinburg side. So it was apparently starting to skip across these ridges. It was found on a Bullhead Trail, which is trail leads up to the highest point in the Smokies, Mount LeConte. And so it was found there later that morning, and then it got to Twin Creeks by 11:30. So pretty much was starting to skip over ridges and move quite rapidly, more or less in a roughly 3-hour time frame. It was moving several miles. And at this point, Twin Creeks is kind of a historic. It's got some historic building and some research facilities. It has several buildings that the Park Service owns there, and it's about 1.5 miles from Gatlinburg. So 11:30 is about 1.5 miles from Gatlinburg. And this is what I saw going in. I got over there around noonish, and this is pretty well what it looked like, just a solid fog of fire. That actually was the way it was in the morning, and our local county forestry folks were getting calls about it, and everybody was wondering, was there another fire, what was going on? But the initial communication with the Park Service indicated that it was coming from the Chimney Tops 2 fire and was moving towards Gatlinburg. And so initially the Tennessee Division of Forestry were going to assist the Park Service with helping them with the Twin Creeks area. But eventually when we saw we were going to have to do something concerning it approaching Gatlinburg, the Park Service took the Twin Creeks area, and so we moved back to the southern end of Gatlinburg up here to try to see what we could do there. And so this is kind of roughly the manpower we had. Again, we had a lot of fires going, and so we didn't have a lot of resources. I think there was also a 20-man crew out of Montana that was in this mix as well. But this is kind of the resources we had to work with. And so our strategy was to try to tie together these most southernmost areas of Gatlinburg. Minot Park is a community around that. It's a city park. Park Vista is a very large concrete hotel that stands up very tall. You can see it from all over town. And then there's a Turkey Nest area here, and then over here is Batson Creek. So we strategized to try to tie together all those different areas with roads or hand lines and stuff like that, see if we could kind of hold it when it first hit Gatlinburg. And so here's kind of the layout of Minot Park's here. Here's Park Vista Hotel here in the parking lot. The Turkey Nest community is here, and the Batson Creek community is there. And so our plan was to try to tie together roads with dozer lines and come off of Ridge to come down into Batson Creek Road and tie it into the Park Vista parking lot, and also to put in a hand line from the Park Vista Hotel on down to that Cherokee Orchard Road that takes you up to the Twin Creeks area I was just talking about. and then also put in some hand line and prep the houses around the Minot Park community as well. So that was kind of our initial strategy to go with, and we, for the most part, pulled that off, put the dozers line in, and put the hand line in off from the parking lot down to the Cherokee Orchard Road. And I drove up to Twin Creeks around 3:30 in the afternoon, and this is kind of what I saw. More or less, fire was pretty frisky, but again, not too scary. And I actually had a passing thought that, if it stayed like this, that we could, and whenever it hit our lines, we should be able to, hopefully, with the manpower we have, hold it. So I was a little optimistic at this point. So when they got done with the dozer line, or with the other hand line, they moved over and, of course, put the lines around this is that Minot Park area, so they're put in there. This is kind of what that looks like with the crew working. Fuels were thankfully fairly light, and the terrain right there where the houses were was halfway level, so that was to our advantage. So along about 6 o'clock, around darkish, between 5:30 and 6, we completed the dozer line, and I was actually over at Baskin Creek there at the top right corner. And I had a truck available, and so I took the dozer driver and a couple other individuals that was helping back up, because we had our equipment, had an engine, and the transport for the dozer back up at the Park Vista parking lot. So basically, we jumped in trucks, and we're going to go get the truck and grab our dozers, and then see what was going on at Minot Park and see what we need to do from there. So we drove around Baskin Creek, come back up to the parking lot, and about the time we were doing this, apparently the winds just really kicked up at that point. At 5:30, 6 o'clock time, really started blowing hard, and pretty much breached our hand lines and some of the dozer lines. So this is what the road going up to Park Vista Hotel looked like. Pretty well, it slammed it pretty hard. There was quite a bit of woody debris in the road, a lot of embers being thrown around. So at that point, we thought it was about as safe to punch on up to where our transports and stuff were than to try to back out of it. So we did manage to get through that, but it was hitting that road very, very hard, which also meant it was hitting the hotel very hard, because it was fire was there first. And what the prediction was for Monday afternoon around 3 o'clock was they just started calling for those exceptionally high winds. So I'm talking about winds averaging 30 and gusting to 74. So that afternoon forecast, they really ramped it up as far as what was going to happen at that point. And so we got up to the Vista Hotel, and again, everything was ablaze, a lot of embers being thrown around. The hotel folks they decided to shelter in place, but when I went into the hotel to check on things, it was full of smoke, I guess, where it had been pulled in by the air conditioning equipment. So folks were nervous, but they were keeping fairly calm. So again, this is the Park Vista parking lot. Quite a bit of fire, quite a bit of flame. So we grabbed our transports and started back down. Again, we had to drive through some fire heat, not serious, but our biggest concern was trees and debris and stuff on the road, which we did have to stop and take a chainsaw to cut our way back down, because we were hearing that Minot Park was needing the extra resources that we had. So we did our best to get back off and get over them as quick as we could. So when we got over there, they were pretty well in holding in defense mode. They decided to that blue line you see there is a wet weather or a wet stream, and so even with the winds, it was a little sheltered. So we decided to try to backfire that off, and then also let the fire bump that yellow line you see, and just try to basically hold that subdivision as best we could. This is kind of what it looked like again, and they did a fairly good job of that. The fuels, thankfully, was to our advantage. They were fairly light, and we had enough manpower to be able to make sure nothing jumped the lines. If it did, we could jump on it pretty quick. So this is probably around 6:15, 6:20, something like that. That's the first house I saw go up, and it seemed like from that point on, to me, that things kind of went into overdrive. Once I saw that first house go, it seemed like they were just going everywhere at that point. That's when the winds really kicked in and started really pushing the fire through the area. I think part of what was going on was the houses themselves being fueled. They were throwing a lot of embers and papers and stuff like that. So I think the houses starting to catch on fire actually added to the speed, just because it was throwing more possibilities of large embers and firebrands from going around. So it really, like I say, really seemed like things really went into overdrive as far as what the fire was doing. Like I say, around at 6:15, 6:30 time frame. So while the rest of them were trying to hang on to Minot Park, me and one of the incident commanders, Bruce Miller, drove around to see what could we do next. While they were holding on to Minot Park, where could we go next and do some good? And fire was rapidly, what we found out was moving rapidly on the east and west side of Gatlinburg, burning along the edge pretty hot and catching structures on fire. They were right against that edge of the mountain, so to speak. And this is looking at this, what they call the needle of Gatlinburg. It's basically an observation tower, and that's a ski mountain in the background there, and there's a ski resort on top of it. There's actually a ski lift right there where that fire is, which pretty well got hammered, so I had to replace that. But that's just showing how rapid the fire was moving. So again, fire was way beyond doing anything with. So at this time, we were starting to see a lot of fire departments. There had been a call for assistance from other fire departments that the Gatlinburg Fire had made, and the emergency management team were making. So we started seeing a large influx of volunteer fire department trucks come in. So they were going around and doing the best they could to hold on to structures. Again, primarily along that eastern and western side of Gatlinburg. This is the Rupee's Aquarium. It's probably the highest dollar structure in the whole town. That's where they have large fish tanks, seawater fish tanks, so a very expensive building. So they took an extra effort to try to hang on to that best they could, and they did manage to save it. I think what helped it, though, there was a concrete parking structure behind it that kind of buffered it a little bit from the fire. Again, VFDs were all over the place, trying to do the best they could when things were blowing through. And this is a kind of a board where the Gatlinburg Fire Department was keeping up with the fire calls they were getting, and that's in a 50-minute period. They were getting that many calls of fires showing up here and there, and some involve structures and some just involve fires getting started. So it just shows you a taste of how fast things were happening. So rain finally moved in. It was supposed to come in around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but it didn't actually come in until probably around midnight to 1 o'clock or so. So when it started raining significantly, we were pretty well timed out and decided the best thing we could do is maybe head in, grab some sleep, and then come back because we knew we were going to be in for a busy day the next day. So here's kind of a map showing kind of where the fire went, the main body of the fire here. Again, here's Chimney Tops down here, and this is Twin Creeks here. So it did burn more or less around Gatlinburg and actually spotted. And some of these was determined that they, besides the embers and stuff from Chimney Tops, of course, with the high winds and everything, we were having power lines come down, and they were starting fires here and there. So once things got going, it wasn't just the chimneys that was causing fire to start up. It was also, down power lines because it was so dry. It was easy enough for a power line to go down before it finally kicked out. When it hit the ground, it would spark enough that those dry fuels would catch up and go. So there was a mixture, of chimney tops and power line issues going on at the same time. And again, this is some of those ridges from the chimney tops would be over to your right, and Gatlinburg would be over to your left. You just seeing that's actually Mount LeConte up there. It's a 6,000 plus foot elevation mountain, and you can see how it's skipping from ridge to ridge as it moves Sunday night into Monday. So next day, which was Tuesday, we decided that we needed to go back and check areas that had burnt really hot, particularly. So we coordinated with the Gatlinburg Fire and EMA folks and determined what communities had been hit extra hard. And so we went to try to check those out and go in and basically look for structures that were still standing but were in danger from perhaps small fires burning around them, things like that, where they might burn after the flame front had come through. So our objective was to try to cover as much ground as we could. And that was rather daunting. This is the Wiley-Oakley area. As you can see, there's like 20 miles of roads here, about 200 plus structures, and that's just one of the many communities that we had to look at and try to cover. And the roads were full of either down trees or down utility lines, and so it was very, very hard to cover all the ground that we did. The best weapon of choice was our small engines. They were Type 6 engines. They could kind of maneuver around some of the debris pretty good, and they were able to stress toy hose and do the best they could with it. But sometimes we were actually going on foot, just walking around checking houses. and this shows you some of the rental structures. Like I say, it's a very high tourism place, so there's a lot of cabins up there. I think most of these you see here are probably mostly rental houses and such. So that's a lot of what was up there. So that's just some of the interface that was on these mountains. Like I say, if the mountain ridge or whatever had a good view, generally there's going to be a cabin on it around the Smoky Mountains. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. It's a very, very dense. I haven't seen anybody say that Gatlinburg holds the record for having the highest density of houses in a wildland urban interface situation, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're not, because there's just a lot of houses in a small area. And of course, when the fire came through, it generally took out a lot of them, as you can see here. There's the ski lift. It got toasted, like I say. And so driving around, this is pretty well what we saw, where we could reach, like I say, reach or walk in. We were seeing lots and lots of burnt houses. And a few set cases where it looks like folks had tried to get away from the fire in the vehicle, and the fire caught them. They lost visibility and ran off the road. I didn't hear anybody getting killed in a fire in a car like that, but that I saw that happen several times. And of course, you have these miraculous houses where everything's going against them. Leaves under the deck, leaves on the porch, and yet they survived. And fire come right up to the edge of the house, and yet the house did not burn. So you still had those what I call miracle houses going on. Places that we tried to defend, the Turkey Nest community, pretty well got hammered pretty hard. Most structures were lost in there. Baskin Creek, again, there was about 25 or 30 houses up that creek, and I think maybe 3 of them survived out of all of them. And here's a picture. Our fire prevention forester kind of went on Google and found a before and after, set up a before and after shot here. So this is what the upper left, of course, is Baskin before, and then the Volkswagen sitting in one of those little concrete places you can see there close to that brown house. So there's kind of just a before and after visual for you. The Minot Park area, we actually did some good. We actually saved probably 25 or 30 structures in there. So that was one we managed to hang on to. And so these are some of the issues you come into. A lot of the utility lines were wood posts, which burnt and fell over, and then of course any kind of tree that came down on the structures that was causing us problems. Sorry, I'm getting. Stacy, am I still coming through?
Yeah,
okay?
there's a little bit of a chop, so if you can maybe adjust a little bit. Sorry, we're going to take a brief pause and try to get the sound a little bit better.
Okay, I'm holding very close to the phone. Does that sound better?
There's still a little bit of a chop.
Is that better? Okay, I come off speaker. How about that? Is that better?
I think that is. Okay, go ahead, and I'll let you know if we have more problems.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry about that, folks. So a lot of power lines in the road, which made access to these sites hard because of all these utility lines. And usually there were main trunk lines going up the main roads, and all those were very heavy wires that basically everything collapsed to the road rather than away from the road. So that was an issue. And then a lot of these other issues we saw as well. A lot of sites had old creosote railroad tie retaining walls, which burnt very hot and would be very difficult to put out because of all the chemicals and stuff in them, and the rosin. Propane tanks were still leaking that hadn't levied or anything. Burning rugs, like those cheap rugs that made out of like coconut fiber, they were burning, and you'd come up to them, they'd be burning right there on the porch, and was potentially going to catch the house on fire. Deck posts smoldering, small areas of the house on fire burning, and smoldering mulch close to the structures. Those were just some of the things we ran across. So this is a typical thing we'd see where you'd have smoldering posts on the decks and things like that. So sometimes we were just literally taking helmets and buckets where we could find, and taking water out of jacuzzis and trying to douse these small fires where we couldn't have access to engines with them. This one here is where they actually took a chainsaw and cut a section of the corner of the house out so that, to keep it from burning, because it was on fire, and the only thing we could do was just basically cut the fire away from the house. That was kind of went on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday things started drying out, and some of the black line areas that had gone out from the rain started catching back up, and so we were trying to find those areas that were closest to the structures and try to hold those two. So that was kind of Thursday, Friday's game plan, was to try to find places where the black edge was starting to catch back up, especially close to where structures were. Long about Wednesday, the red team, Southern Area Red Team, came in and pretty well took the fire, brought in a lot of hand crews, and took over the job of trying to put out what remaining fire that there was along that black line edge that had gone out from the rain. So that's pretty well the fire. Again, just a little wind up on the post-prevention activities going on. A little pre-activity. 2001, our agency did do a county-wide assessment of the communities, and there were 155 of them, but 42% of them were considered very high-risk category just because of their location and the terrain. But there were a few, like Bluff Mountain became a fire-wise community, and 3 others did as well, and 1 more is in the works now as we speak. So there was, because of the conditions over there, we were doing our best to try to get the word out concerning fire-wise and all the things that entailed, living on the edge, get ready, set, grow programs, working with community leaders, working with homeowner associations and planning commissions. All those were just, through the years tried to get them to be aware of the situation and try to be ready for what happened. And in 2017, as a post-fire activity, Gatlinburg Planning Office we started distributing packets to homeowners that were getting building permits to rebuild or build new structures in other places. And there was a workshop for Firewise that was conducted by our agency in Gatlinburg. Pigeon Forge is planning on trying to become a Firewise community by the end of the year, so they're working on their community-wide protection plan as we speak. And then Pigeon Forge is also working with community planning program concerning wildfire as well. So there are some activities going on. It's probably needs to be we wouldn't hurt if they would work on some of their building ordinances some, but because of the high tourist dollar potential of the area, it's going to be probably difficult to convince homeowners and stuff to follow suit, or because, like I say, there is a lot of dollars involved here, and so. But I think they do need to kind of do some serious consideration, maybe changing some building ordinances to kind of make things better in the future. With that, that's pretty well the end of the program. I'm sorry for the any sound issues that come up. So I guess, Stacey, at this point, if you want to check those questions, I'll do my best to answer as many as I can.
All right. So I'm going to paste these here. Bear with me a second. Okay, so the first question, this is kind of a comment/question, is it's interesting that people are still not pursuing ordinances or regulations relating to building materials or defensible space. Is the concern about the cost to the homeowners, or is it a fear that they would delay rebuilding?
I would say it might be the latter, to the delay in rebuilding. Like I say, I guess the approach that sounds like the communities are taking is that they're going to try to do the education approach first with the Firewise program. Certainly try to provide them with as much upfront information as possible before they build, and maybe over time they may slowly do it. I can't really speak for the community leaders, but it's certainly something that they probably will be considering, I'm sure, in the future.
And I know, in California, we've had a lot of tragic incidences where we have had entire communities burned down. And as hard as it is on everybody, there is some opportunity that when you are rebuilding to, kind of design a community that has better access, that has different building materials, but it kind of has to come from the local, county, or community decisions. So, but it has been pretty effective into kind of designing more resilient communities in the future. So that's just my little 2 cents. I'll move on with the questions now. The next one is, given the annual fall leaf drop and primary leaf litter fuels, how do you focus hazard fuel reduction efforts?
Well, around the structures is pretty well. Probably would have to be kind of again, it's why I think the Firewise program is so important to kind of show that a lot of the things that are around the structures that need to be addressed is kind of a individual house level, cleaning out gutters, maybe blowing leaves away from the house, not using combustible moisture materials and things like that. As far as the surrounding areas, not sure because of the dense interface that anybody would be very keen on doing any kind of hedge of fuel reductions through using prescribed fire or anything like that. So I think at this point probably Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge and those other communities probably will be focusing on trying to make the homeowner responsible for trying to make sure his own piece of ground, so to speak, is as bulletproof or fireproof as he can make it through annual cleanup, like I say, cleaning the fuels up around it, things like that.
Yeah, excellent. And I, again, I'm throwing in my 2 cents here. I know that we've done a lot of research, and the most important places for keeping your home safe are within, the various, like within the house. So within the leaf around the house, the leaf litter around the house. And then it's kind of, as you move further away from the house, it's less of a factor. I mean, if you're still up against a lot of fuel, embers could be created and things can happen. But focusing on the house first and moving outward seems to be a pretty good approach. So great answer. The next one is, any effort related to relocation, evacuation, or sheltering in space improvements since the fire?
I know they're talking about, like I say, Pigeon Forge, I think, actually participated in the Ready, Set, Go pilot program back a few years ago. And so I haven't heard any movement just yet. Like I say, right now they're concentrating, I think, on just trying to see what the Firewatch program entails and trying to become a community, a Firewatch community, so that on a community level they could be working as a group to organize, like I say, reducing the fuels around houses and things like that. And I'm sure they'll probably be looking at the situations that were going on and trying to, for the future, planning on maybe some better evacuations plans and maybe locations where folks can get in other words, have a plan in place where folks definitely know what to do and where to go.
Well, that was a perfect lead into our next one, which was there any evacuation protocol before the fire? And then if not, it sounds like they might be working on one in the future. That's maybe a step to move forward with. And what were the big issues during evacuation that led to civilian deaths? Multi-part question.
Well, the access roads, basically we're talking mountain country, and so the roads typically were fairly narrow, two lanes with fairly crooked roads, and one way in, one way out. So I'm sure just the difficulty of the infrastructure of the roads was part of it, and the fire just moved so rapidly that a lot of times there was no time. I know there was some evacuation orders given out. I'm not sure what the timelines on those were, but I'm sure a lot of it was the fact that there was a lot of situations where getting out just wasn't an easy thing to do because of the road conditions and the narrowness of the roads, the crookedness of the roads, things like that.
And do you know, was there an evacuation protocol kind of in place before?
Yes, I think there was. I think they had something established through maybe some cell phone coverages and one of these all alert things. And I think they also, I think they eventually did use it. They had a siren system that they eventually used to try to warn people. And plus, things are going door to door. Initially, they were trying to, do volunteer evacuations at that southern end, and then gradually it led to where they were doing mandatory evacuations later on. And like I say, they had something in place, but probably because of the rapidity of the fire, it just moved so fast that I guess they had times when probably just couldn't get the word out to everybody.
And so you kind of already answered this a little bit, but do you know if there was any, when it came to civilian deaths, was it just that they weren't evacuating in time, either because they didn't get the message, or was it because they got stuck? And you mentioned the roads were a big issue, so I guess any other bits of information from that topic?
No, I didn't really hear the individual situations of the deaths. I really can't address that one. I just don't have enough information about there were, I think I mentioned there were 14 total casualties in this, and I can't really address that question. I just don't know enough about the individual situations concerning the deaths.
Yeah, that's fine. So switching gears a little bit here from the evacuation kind of questions. Given the climate in the area, how rare are those frontal winds that you talked about?
Well, it's not uncommon for our cold fronts to have strong winds as the front approaches and have gusty winds. But this one here was particularly, well, it's the worst that I'm aware of. I don't know if it's set records or what, but there was one remote area weather station that recorded like 87 mile an hour winds. So we're talking, I can't remember what hurricane force winds are, but it's got to be getting up there. So nothing like this. I mean, like I say, typical cold front, yeah, the winds get up probably maybe as much as 15 to 20 miles an hour on average, and gusts, 20 to 30. That's probably average, but this one was just exceptional with the high, steady winds was 30 miles an hour, and then the gusts were like in the 60s and at one time even in the 80s.
Yeah, that doesn't make it easy, that's for sure. The next one is, with all the stated power line hazards, how are the utilities tied into the incident?
I am not sure. I'm sure they were contacted, especially when fires were going, to probably try to cut power wherever they could. I'd say that their primary, when things were going on, was just to try to get out, I'm sure, wherever they could and try to probably kill the power where it was necessary to do. But again, I don't have a lot of information on what the utilities companies were doing in relation to what the EMA director and stuff like that was wanting. So I'm sure they were doing what they could, but I don't really have very much information on that either.
It's fine. You had a lot of great information for the presentation. So it looks like we've got most of the questions. We'll take one more last call here if anybody wants to do one, but if not, then I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Again, if you need the presentation, PowerPoint, or the recording, that will be up on our website. And if you registered with us through Eventbrite, I'll also be sending you that link within the next week. Feel free to take advantage of any of those web links there at the bottom. And thank you so much, Steve, for talking to us today and sharing your expertise.